Hello, oddities. Welcome back to another episode of Midnight Curiosities. I'm Curator Raquel,
And I'm Curator War Beauty.
coming at you live from a mausoleum in New Orleans.
I feel like we're in a mausoleum in New Orleans.
You don't like our darkness chamber?
I do. I do like our darkness chamber.
I do too.
It feels better.
It feels more accurate to be reporting on if we are watching the History Channel at 3 a.m.
This is how I would do it.
This is how you would do it.
With a really heavy blanket draped precariously.
I think you can all agree the audio sounds better though. And we're more close together now as people.
That's true. We debated just turning this podcast into a 20-minute ASMR making out, but...
You said that last week.
It's like...
Now we know your real feelings on the matter.
Well, it's like trying to raise a fish.
What?
They only have like 4-second memory.
Oh, all right then. How has your week been?
Let me tell you about my week.
Eventful. It's been eventful.
Let me tell you about my week, okay? All right, listen to this, listeners. If you're with us and you like us, I need you to understand, I'm currently beefing with our niece, an 8-year-old, okay?
She has picked a fight, and she is beefing hard with an 8-year-old.
Okay, so this is how this started. She decides to rate all of her aunts on a coolness scale, right? I get 2%.
2%.
And by the way, the max, and we didn't go all the way to 100%. We went to like 100,000%. Okay?
Sure. I took it as a scale of 1 to 100%.
No, she definitely clearly said 100,000.
For me, yes, but that's because that's how far I exceed 100%.
So anyways.
So, Curator War Beauty was 2% cool.
I was 2% cool, you guys.
Curator Runeweaver was 100% cool. Curator Green Warden was 99% or 98%.
She was 99.
99% cool. And of course, yours truly, Curator Raquel, was 100,000% cool. So again, I don't know why you're beefing with a 100% accurate rating.
You know what? That's not even my problem. So here's where the actual problem lies. But this is how this started, right? Okay, but then this little heretic has the audacity to say to my face via her mother, because she didn't actually say it to my face, she said it via her mother.
Sure.
Because she don't have the balls to say it to my face.
Sure, she's a coward.
Right. And a science denier.
And so the reason War Beauty's rating was 2% is because she's not a good magician. She's a fake magician.
She said I wasn't magic.
She said you're not magic. I don't know what to tell you.
I am magic.
Have you considered being magic?
First off, I provided her plenty of evidence, so I cornered her the other day.
I know you did.
On voice chat. I cornered her and I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, where's your proof that I'm not magic?" And she said, "I just think you just pick stuff up and say you're magic." And I'm like, except that I've literally proved to you 100 times since you've known me that I am magic, but okay, go off, I guess.
So she has called this 8-year-old a heretic.
Sacrilegious.
And
a science denier. It's the truth. She needs to know.
Maybe you should just be better at magic.
I'm fine at magic. The burden of proof is on her. If we learned anything from the Skeptics episode,
okay,
it's that James Randi, one of the most famous American skeptics, he says that the burden of proof falls both ways. So, I have provided evidence to her that I am indeed magic, but the burden of proof...
She has not provided any evidence to you that you're not magic?
Exactly.
She's also 8 and thinks that she's a cat. Gotta
start them young. Critical thinking. This is where it starts.
In other news, you tried cooking.
Oh, I almost... Yeah. So the moral of the story is don't eat vegetables because...
That's not the moral of the story. War Beauty tried to open up a can of vegetables and sliced her thumb nearly in half and damaged the nerve.
I mean, it's pretty lit, though. I was opening the green beans and Curator Green Warden comes downstairs and I'm holding a bleeding thumb because I'm the one who's responsible for making dinner.
Right.
And I'm like holding a bleeding thumb and I'm just like, so we may have a problem.
Yeah. And then she texts the group chat and she's like, so don't freak out, but like, what if you don't stop bleeding and you need to go to the hospital? You are a host unto yourself, and you require constant supervision.
But at least I'm magical.
Still in question.
I can't believe this. I'm literally quitting my day job.
It's funny because, we mentioned in a previous episode that on our Halloween ritual, that same child used your magic wand and did her own magic that has come true quite fruitfully, I would say.
Yeah, but, Aunt War Beauty's magic wand doesn't equate to Aunt War Beauty being magic.
Well, I kind of wanted to use that as a segue to today's topic.
Sacred objects.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Sacred objects is what we're talking about this week. Obviously, War Beauty's magic wand is one of those said objects.
Right.
So, on a broad scale definition term, what would you consider a sacred object to be?
A sacred object is a tool or an implement or something physical that is used in ritual.
Yeah. So I tried to do a little research on this episode beforehand, and that's pretty much what I came up with as well. There's a website called The Lotus that said a sacred object is anything you would consider to hold a sanctity and is used in ritual. Pretty much all of the sources that I saw basically all come down to the same thing of if it is used in ritual, then it is a sacred object.
Right. So let's talk about general sacred objects first before we get into like the cool stuff.
Oh, okay.
So a general sacred object, and this is across any faith or religion or ritualistic practice.
Sure.
Because I do want to talk about, I guess I would call them secular sacred objects.
Yeah, that's fair.
So you have your typical ones. I mean, you have things like rosaries, mala beads, holy water, crucifix. There can be artwork and imagery. You can have statues and figurines.
Sure. And those kind of things transfer across all religions,
Right.
Well, not necessarily a crucifix, but a lot of the other ones, artwork, imagery, statues, things like that are for any religion.
Right. And you can pretty much just Google whatever faith or religion. And
Sure.
if you Google sacred objects or relics, it'll come up with a huge list.
A lot of Christian ones.
Yes.
Almost exclusively. I even Googled pagan holy items.
We're going to talk about that.
And all the results were like, what to put on your Wiccan altar.
Right. But those are sacred objects. So you have things
sure.
like your wand, your athame,
Sure.
offering bowls can be sacred objects. And then if you want to get into more Eastern philosophy, you've got things like conch shells, you have mala, Tibetan prayer beads, mala beads,
Sure.
you've got bells that Buddhists use.
Of course.
And there's a whole lot of other ones, and I'm not 100% on how to pronounce a lot of them, so I didn't want to say them.
That's totally fair.
And butcher them.
I did want to note, I thought it was interesting that when you search for sacred objects, the Britannica Encyclopedia does not have an entry for sacred objects. They have ceremonial objects.
A lot of times, sacred objects come from ceremony.
Yes.
So let's actually, before we get into like the really cool kind of conspiracy-y
That's my favorite part.
Let's talk about secular sacred objects, because I think this is important to note. A sacred object does not have to specifically be of religious or a kind of faith-based orientation.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be Buddhist or Christian or Islamic or Hindu or pagan. You can have, insert any rock star here. Their guitar would be considered a sacred object.
Oh, sure. Anything that's highly treasured or
that you use in a ritual. And now that's the key, is that it has to have some sort of ritualistic use. But let's say you play the drums, your drumsticks, your drum set, that could be considered a sacred object, because if music is your language.
If what you said, your insert rock star here.
Sure.
If you obtain their guitar, you wouldn't necessarily be using it, but it would still be a sacred object, right?
Yes. So a sacred object is something that is used, but let's say Jimi Hendrix, for example, no longer living. Jimi Hendrix original played guitars would be considered sacred objects in the rock world.
Sure.
and in the music industry because Jimmy used them.
What about things that you like don't use, like artwork? Because there's plenty of artwork out there that is in museums, as it should be, that I would consider sacred as an artist.
Right, and they were ritualistically painted.
Okay, sure.
Van Gogh, Da Vinci, Picasso,
Sure.
and name any of them.
Okay, that makes sense.
It comes down to an object can be used by a lot of people, but typically when you're looking at, we consider these kind of mythological level sacred objects.
Of course.
Those are typically done by like one person who becomes really famous or really well known and revered in whatever their discipline is.
Okay.
Which then makes the objects that they created sacred.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. It has to do with the revering of the particular person the object came from.
Okay, that makes sense because, you have objects that come from holy people or saints or sacred people that we've discussed in a previous episode. Any of their personal effects, I think, would be considered sacred.
Yes, and we're actually going to talk about some really famous ones.
Okay.
And we're going to get into kind of a little bit of conspiracy, a little tinfoil hat here.
Okay, I'm excited.
Sacred objects in religion. So we're going to talk about them specifically in religion.
Right. That's traditionally how they are known.
Yes, then it's the most traditional way. This is the History Channel at 3 a.m. kind of way you're going to know them.
This is the History Channel at 2 p.m. kind of way.
Right. So sacred objects and relics, when they reach what's like mythological status,
such as like the Holy Grail.
That's right. Kind of like the most iconic one.
Sure. Yeah. That's when you say a mythological like relic. That's what comes to mind.
Right. These particular relics are believed to have supernatural powers.
Yes.
Which is interesting because we can talk about metaphysical properties of these particular objects and their use. So to create a sacred object, mythological or otherwise, every object, no matter how famous it becomes, starts off as a mundane piece of whatever.
Sure.
It is literally just a thing. I could make a vase, right? Piece of pottery.
Okay.
And I have this vase that I use all the time in the same ritualistic manner. And I do it and I give my offering to Freya, who I am a occultist of.
Sure.
And I use this vase for offerings to Freya every single time, every single thing I do. And then I become really famous, right?
Okay.
And I become known for, my rituals to Freya and my reverence to Freya, all these things.
Of course.
Right? So when I die,
right,
that object could potentially now become a mythological relic.
Right.
But the metaphysical properties behind that, and this is true for any relic, it started as just a piece of pottery, a mundane vase. But every time you do a ritual, you're putting intention into it, and intention is just a type of energy transference.
Right.
So as you're transferring your energy and you do the same energy over and over and over, this vase is now going to be perceived to have taken on supernatural powers because it was so powerfully infused in this very particular way.
Sure, repeatedly.
Right. for years. And whoever has that vase, they're likely going to report that it has some interesting supernatural qualities. Like the mead is always going to taste like strawberries, or, every time they pour it, they get really horny, or, That
sounds like it would be one of your relics.
Well, right. But they're going to report some sort of unbelievable miracle level metaphysical property.
Sure, something unexplained.
And this is what makes the famous relics really interesting, in my opinion, is because of the metaphysical properties and the energy that they bring versus what's reported. Now, a lot of these are hundreds and thousands of years old.
Right.
So it's interesting to see what they do because if let's say, well, actually, we'll talk about one. Let's talk about,
I was thinking it's interesting to consider as well when you go through, say, for your vase example, if you put the same amount of energy and repetition into it, and it does become infused with your energy and your intentions,
right,
and all of those things, but say it everyone knows that you use it on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
But then you die and it goes missing. I think it's interesting to take into consideration what legend does to sacred objects, because you know it can do one thing, but the mystery and people contemplating it and exaggerating it, I think it affects people's perception on an item that if it does reappear, it could be something of a placebo effect where they think it is significantly more powerful than it is just because of the legend that has preceded it.
And that, in and of itself, gives that item more power.
Right.
Which is really interesting because, you know, and this goes into, I'll get a little bit into this, but it goes into like a God creation theory. This can go into the creation of sacred people, sacred places, sacred objects, anything people consider sacred.
Sure.
If you put that kind of lens on it and you think that it is like so much more than just a piece of pottery because of whatever reason, you are now making it more.
You get out of it what you put into it.
Right. You're making it so much more. And this is how mythological and legendary items are genuinely created. It's the will and the intention and the stories of the people who retell the story of this object or this person.
The fascination and the mystery that surrounds it.
Right. And, you know, the thing that helps those things the most is time.
Okay. So you said you were going to just kind of go through some of these now. I see you have a list over there.
I do. I have some really interesting ones.
Okay, I'm excited. I haven't looked at your notes, so this will be all fresh for me and for our listeners.
So I kind of went through the different major religious umbrellas, and I was like, well, let's see some famous ones, because a lot of these are on display.
Okay, yes.
Which is really fun. So let's start with the most obvious, Christianity.
Christianity is the easiest, most popular.
Easiest, they have the most, and they're kind of the most controversial.
They're kind of the loudest about it.
Right. It's so interesting, though, because if it is true and they have what they have, that is bananas. Now, of course, we're so far removed from the history, there's no way to tell the authenticity of a lot of these.
Sure.
You know, these objects could be authentic to exactly the purpose and person they're saying.
I'm so curious, like, what kind of objects you're talking about. Like, is it like the Dead Sea Scrolls? Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, no, we're going to get so...
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. Let's start with the Holy Grail.
Okay.
Made famous because it is the
legend
chalice of Jesus.
Sure.
It's literally what the Holy Grail is supposed to be.
It was made famous from Indiana Jones.
And I think the Ark of the Covenant was more made famous, again, in more recent history by Indiana Jones. But the Holy Grail was said to have been in the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay.
In popular fiction. But, so the Holy Grail is like the chalice of Jesus, basically. And there isn't a whole lot to say on the Holy Grail other than Monty Python's...
Sure. Excellent film.
Film was really funny, and I recommend everyone see it. So the Holy Grail is believed to be housed in a basilica in Leon, Spain.
Okay.
Interesting. Now,
how did we come to that belief? I'm sure years of research and science and
no, actually. So what's interesting about this is, of course, scientists have studied these objects.
Of course. And
they can accurately date them for the most part. But what's interesting is we don't actually know.
Oh, okay.
Because here is, as I stutter, here is the problem with sacred objects of mythological importance.
Okay.
I'm not trying to say one way or the other, and I'm going to let the audience decide for themselves.
Of course.
If they believe this is the object or not. What happens, though, is that scientists can go in, they can very easily date these things because they're objects. Fakes have been found.
Sure.
But the problem is when you find something that roughly correlates to the date that this object would have existed, the problem becomes, is this just some cup?
Sure, you can't definitively say this is it or this is not it.
Right, so this comes down, now this is true pseudoscience. This comes down to true faith. If you believe that this object is truly the Holy Grail or not.
Okay, fascinating.
Right, because they can prove that it's about the age that the Holy Grail would be, but
That's all they can prove.
Unless you have a photo of Jesus holding that chalice.
Right.
I got news for you. It might not be it.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So when we go through, keep in mind, these are all speculative. Not a single one of these can be proved.
Okay.
But every single one that I'm mentioning has been tested by scientists, and it could potentially be.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I like that there's no answer.
Right.
I like the mystery of it.
I think that's what draws a lot of people in. Also, you can go see these objects.
Sure.
So I'm going to try and give you the locations as best I can.
You could just be going to see some cup.
You could just be going to see some cup.
Interesting. Okay. Carry on.
So you have the Holy Grail in Leon, Spain.
Okay.
Let's talk about the Crown of Thorns.
Okay.
So the Crown of Thorns is the crown that was placed on Jesus' head.
Right, at the crucifixion.
At his crucifixion. And it's literally a crown woven out of thorn branch.
Okay. I've never considered that would be a physical object in this world.
It's one of the ones people don't consider. What's interesting, and I'm so sad I wasn't in France at a time of year when this was on display. They only display it a few times a year. And one of them being Easter, of course. The whole crown is in Notre Dame in Paris, France.
Oh.
Yes, and I was so excited when I went there. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe it'll be on display randomly, but it wasn't. And I was so sad. But, so as you guys may or may not know, the Notre Dame burned.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. I wonder if it got damaged in the fire.
It did not. The Crown of Thorns survived the fire.
That's because it is holy and your sacred flame will not touch it.
Say what you want, but that is something people are saying is that, a lot of these holy relics have been in places that were damaged by fires, by weather, by war.
Sure.
And
they
survived. And it further adds to the mystery and the legend that maybe these are supernatural sacred objects.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
This is one of my favorite things to talk about is because and you can go see them.
That's crazy.
You can get right up next to them.
That's absolutely buck wild.
So it's interesting, and I will say, because we love the Vatican on this show.
We love the Vatican.
We love the Vatican.
The Vatican doesn't love us.
No, but the Vatican houses the world's largest sacred relic, collection, yeah.
That tracks. From what I know of the Vatican, they would have...
Allegedly Pittsburgh.
I'm sorry, what?
Apparently the Vatican...
Pittsburgh is second place to the Vatican?
That's what it said.
In the world?
That's what it said.
Pennsylvania?
Yeah. That's what it said. Apparently there's a museum there.
We should take a road trip to Pittsburgh.
Right, we live right there. And I was like...
That's 4 hours from us.
I was like, excuse me, I guess I'm going to Pennsylvania now.
That's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. I wonder why.
Okay, so I don't know what they were measuring this on, by the way. No clue.
Number of holy relics?
Right, but I think they were measuring it on number of holy relics that have been tested and kind of proved that it could be that.
Fascinating.
Because the Vatican has a lot of relics, obviously.
Sure, yes.
I mean, they're obviously a treasure trove of things that are going to be both real and fakes.
Yes.
And I think that the Vatican has less relics than people think.
Probably.
Because the Vatican's only going to house the real deals.
That's true.
Yeah, once it's kind of proven fake by science, they'll farm it out to a museum.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. Vatican is so fascinating.
Well, we'll get into them. Give me a call, Illuminati.
So fascinating. All right, what else you got?
Well, no, hold on. So, Crown of Thorns.
Oh.
The crown is actually in Notre Dame.
Right.
I don't know when that's ever going to go on display again. Probably not until Notre Dame is repaired in some sort of way. But the Vatican does house one single thorn from the Crown of Thorns. That's why I brought them up. I wanted to mention that.
Okay.
Let's talk about.
So random, but okay.
So. There's a whole lot of relics from Jesus' crucifixion. There's the spear.
The cross.
Well, let's talk about the cross. I'm not going to talk about a lot of them, but I do want to talk about the cross.
Okay.
Because this one is particularly fascinating in that, allegedly, during the time of Constantine, someone went out and actually found the cross. Yeah, literally found the whole cross, broke it down, and sold it off to a whole bunch of people in pieces.
Excellent.
Scientists have guesstimated, based off of all of the quote-unquote original cross fragments, that the cross would be much larger than it actually would have been. So there's obviously a
Okay.
lot of fake cross parts. But what's
A lot of
funny
fake cross parts.
is theologians have gone in and said, well, that's because that's the miracle of the power of the cross.
Because it was supernaturally large.
Right.
That's how Jesus carried it with the one shoulder.
Right. So I don't know what you want to make of that.
Maybe it's magically self-reproducing wood.
That's kind of what they got at.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that was me joking.
That's kind of what they were getting at.
That was me saying the most absurd thing I could think of.
Well, it's the theories surrounding it are pretty absurd.
Okay.
But what's fascinating about the cross is that also the Vatican is believed to house the most pieces of the original
Sure.
true cross, which would make sense. It tracks. But in, again, Pennsylvania randomly. I know, seriously, I cannot wait to go to
Let's
this museum.
go to Pennsylvania.
I cannot wait to go to this museum. It's in
We
Bollesburg.
have many things to go see in Pennsylvania.
I know. What's up with Pennsylvania?
I don't know. They're on my radar right now.
Right. I see you. So in Bollesburg, which is in central PA, it's in the middle of Farmville.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
It's kind of near State College, which is where Penn State is.
Sure.
So it's maybe 45 minutes, not even from there. And there is a museum that houses America's oldest chapel. This is a one-room chapel that dates back to the time of Christopher Columbus. And it has a cross inside of it that has a clear part. And in the clear part is allegedly a few splinters of the original cross.
Oh, interesting.
And it's this tucked away little hidden nonsense
That's
museum.
so wild to me. That's fascinating. Okay.
So that's out there.
They're just out there for you to go look at.
Yeah, museums house these things.
That's cool. Okay, great. Do you have other Christian ones, or are we going to move on?
Oh, no, I've got a few more Christian ones because I think these are kind of the most fascinating.
Sure. They are quite fascinating.
So you have Mary's holy belt.
Now, Mary is traditionally worshipped more in Catholicism, so
Yes.
I don't actually know a lot about Mary or her belt.
So Mary Magdalene.
Jesus. Oh, okay.
Not Jesus' mom, Mary Magdalene.
Okay. Well, that was unspecified, but okay.
Gave her camel woven hair belt to Thomas the Apostle before her ascension.
Okay.
This belt is housed in Italy, and they built a chapel or a little mini cathedral, I guess, specifically to house this belt.
Okay. That's fascinating. It's beyond the metaphysicality of it. The history to me is just fascinating.
I mean, these are certainly very provocative and sexy things to think about.
They're just very old relics. They're just
Right.
extremely old. That's fascinating that they have survived the test of time and we can still go see them in 2021.
I will say a lot of these relics are not just on display willy-nilly.
Sure.
They do go on display and get paraded around
At certain times of year.
at certain times a year.
Right.
Yeah. So then you have the tunic of the Blessed Virgin.
The tunic of the Blessed Virgin.
This is allegedly the tunic that Mary, Jesus' mom, wore
Sure.
when she gave birth to Jesus. And it is in a basilica in France.
How do you come across something like that?
So a lot of these things have histories of like being gifts or people literally went out to like seek them. Well, we're going to get into, I think, the coolest one.
I'm thinking about Mary giving birth in a barn somewhere and then just holding on to her tunic like someone's going to want this one day.
One day is going to be so famous.
I feel like it'd be covered in blood and animal secretions and you would throw it away.
So here's some interesting ones. Here's two body parts.
I'm sorry, did you say body parts?
Body parts.
You have my whole attention.
So let's talk about John the Baptist.
John the Baptist's tomb is in the Vatican.
No. Well, yes, but
Yes.
John the Baptist's head is not.
Not with his tomb?
No.
Okay. Good.
John the Baptist's, so depending on what religion you are, depends on which head you believe to be John's.
What?
So there's a few of these floating around. This is why it's really like, there's science, but at the same time, it's a lot of guesswork.
Okay.
Because we didn't know John.
Okay.
So John the Baptist, if you are Muslim, you believe that his head is in a mosque in Damascus.
Okay.
If you're Christian, you believe that it is in Rome.
What?
But there are reports that it's also in southern France or still in Turkey.
What? How many heads are out? How many nameless heads are being worshipped as John the Baptist?
Bro, I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
So there's a problem with holy relics is things like this happen.
You have 4 heads, one of which only one can be the right one.
There was only one head on John the Baptist's body.
As
So
far as I'm aware.
so this really again comes down to faith.
That's
What do you believe?
fascinating. That's so interesting.
Let's talk about the Shroud of Turin. This one made news in the last 20 years because it was discovered. And the Shroud of Turin is Jesus's death shroud.
Okay.
So it has blood and it shows the
Ooh.
holy wounds of where he would have been pierced for crucifixion.
Can they run like DNA tests on the blood?
They have, and everything is inconclusive. You'll see a lot of conspiracy theories out there about how they did disprove it and how it was just like liquid, but really the tests are 100% inconclusive.
I guess they would need Jesus's DNA to compare it
to conclusively say, yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so where is this shroud?
Oh man, I didn't write it down. It's on display somewhere in Europe.
Okay, if it would be anywhere, it would be Europe or apparently Pennsylvania.
Or apparently Pennsylvania. Let's talk about the Vatican.
You always want to talk about the Vatican.
Well, no, because it's interesting. So,
I mean, it fits in a holy objects episode.
according to, I guess I would say legend, myth, but literally according to the Bible, Peter is the rock upon which the church would be built.
In the Vatican? St. Peter's tomb is there too.
Yes, but we didn't know that until the last 10 years.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they actually could never conclusively find Peter's tomb. They knew, so the guy who built the Vatican the first time literally did an entire map, a geography of the life and times of Peter, and he went to the place he roughly thought Peter would have been buried. It wasn't until the last decade that it was proved correct.
Fascinating.
And so the Vatican has tombs underneath of it.
Yes.
And they've been excavating, but they discovered a hidden chamber. And all of the tombs in this chamber are graffitied, like ancient graffiti.
Ooh.
And they believe, it's been, I guess you could say proven now.
They found Peter.
That Peter was one of the heavily graffitied tombs.
Wow.
So the church was literally built upon Peter.
As it should be.
As it should be. It's not on display. You cannot go see it.
No.
There's only like 2 or 3 documentaries out there with cameras that were allowed to go and view it during the initial excavations.
Oh, wow.
But as far as it's standing now, I'm not sure. Pope Francis has actually made it a point to make the Vatican a little more transparent with stuff like that. But even still, they're not going
to be that transparent.
Yeah, they're not going to be super transparent.
That's so cool. I love how old the Vatican is. I think that's what gets me more than anything else, which is the history.
Right. It's very old. Now let's talk about my most exciting one, because I want to know if this is real.
Okay.
Okay. I'm dying to know.
Tickles your fancy.
The Ark of the Covenant.
Okay.
Allegedly.
So, what is the Ark of the Covenant?
Okay, well, the Ark of the Covenant was this gilded wooden chest that sat in the innermost sanctuary layers of the temples in Jerusalem, and it's very sacred to pretty much anyone of the Abrahamic faiths.
Okay.
Moses had it.
Okay.
Well, it's what's believed to house the 10 Commandments.
Oh, okay.
This is this thing.
Understood.
Right. Ancient, believed to house some of the most sacred relics in all of the Abrahamic faiths.
Okay.
No one knows where it is. And it's huge. This is not like a little chest. This is a big honking boy. Nobody knows where it is.
Okay.
So, recently, it has come to the world stage attention that the Ark of the Covenant is believed to have been given as a gift to the Queen of Sheba.
Okay.
For safekeeping or for whatever. But it was a gift for the Queen of Sheba. There's only one country in the world that has ever claimed to be Sheba, and that is modern-day Ethiopia.
Oh, interesting.
So, in Ethiopia, and I'm not going to attempt to pronounce this town's name because I'm really going to butcher it, but it starts with a T.
That narrows it down.
Right. Well, if you Google Ark of the Covenant Ethiopia, it's literally the only thing that's going to come up.
Okay.
And there's a few documentaries that have been done about following the trail of the Ark of the Covenant to Ethiopia.
Okay.
And I personally believe this. Like, I kind of personally subscribe to this one.
Okay.
Because the only thing missing is us being able to see the Ark of the Covenant.
But everything else fits?
Everything else fits.
Like timeline, geography.
Yes, everything else fits to what this town in Ethiopia is claiming, that they host the Ark of the Covenant. And they have this temple that they built, and only there's a order of monks that are sworn to protect the Ark, and they cannot leave the temple grounds ever in their life.
Can't leave it unattended.
Right. No monk can leave. So every monk, if you're
they don't want them like talking about it or something.
I'm not sure. It's just one of their rules is that once you become a monk in this order, you
don't leave this building.
Well, you don't leave the grounds.
Okay, that's interesting.
But it's not a big temple. Let me tell you right now. I've seen it on the TV. So the Ark of the Covenant is allegedly in this temple in Ethiopia. And what's interesting is right now Ethiopia is in a lot of geopolitical upset. And the military is trying to coup the country, and they just attacked this temple and not too long ago massacred about 1,000 people in this temple square. And Ethiopia thinks that it was, or the people think it was an attempt to steal the Ark of the Covenant.
Ew.
Ooh. Right. It is fascinating.
I love the mystery and the supernatural aspects to it.
Well, think about the implications. So let's say they do have the Ark of the Covenant, or even a relic that dates the same as the Ark of the Covenant that they believe to be the Ark of the Covenant. Like, let's say the Queen of Sheba was just given another really beautiful gilded chest
full of holy relics.
Right. That over time myth turned to legend into obscurity, and now they believe this is the Ark of the Covenant, even though it was just a gift. Regardless, this would be one of the most historically significant finds for the Abrahamic faiths pretty much almost ever. And the implications of the Ark of the Covenant being real, I think would upset the world. I think that it would be such an upset to the Abrahamic faiths, it would spark a really serious holy war.
Why do you think so? Why would people be upset?
It comes down to, I was right and you were wrong. Because all of the Abrahamic faiths they have roughly the same pool of things they're drawing on, but they all view these events and people slightly different. The Ark of the Covenant
would prove one right.
Would pretty much definitively tell people this is how it was.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's fascinating to think about, because that's like real history that could be happening now.
Right. And that's in Ethiopia. And I personally I don't know if at the end of the day I really truly believe it is the Ark of the Covenant, but I think the case for it is
they've got something
pretty strong. And if it's not the actual Ark, they have something that dates to the time when the Ark was created.
Sure.
And they have something that's gonna change the face of religious history forever.
That's so cool. Do you have any maybe not so Christian?
I do. I wanted to cover the Christian ones because I think those are really fascinating.
They are absolutely fascinating, but that's for you and for me, who come from a Christian background and who love religion as well as history.
Well, let's talk about Eastern philosophies.
Okay.
They do have a lot of sacred objects, but none that are of mythological status.
Yeah. They kind of put sacredness on a lot of smaller objects.
Right. But one thing that did spark many, many wars, but now sits in Sri Lanka in a temple, is the last remains of the Buddha. So Buddha was cremated.
Right.
And after his cremation, allegedly all that was left was a single tooth.
Ooh.
And it is said that whoever holds this tooth has the divine power and divine right to rule.
Oh, ooh.
Which obviously sparks a lot of wars.
Cool. I wonder how Buddha feels about that. That seems kind of contradictory.
Actually, there's another guy we're going to talk about that feels that way. But yes, so the Buddha's tooth is in a temple in Sri Lanka. I don't think you can actually go see that one.
Okay.
I just know that it is there.
Okay.
That's pretty much the only interesting Eastern one out there, because there's a whole bunch of smaller ones, but none that are kind of capture the imagination the same as Buddha's tooth.
Sure.
So this is another Abrahamic faith, but let's talk about Islam, because
Okay.
they actually have this, like, I think aside from Christianity, have them and Judaism have the second most holy relics that are like really famous.
Sure.
So in Islam, you have the Kaaba and the Black Stone, which are at Mecca, and these are shrines that people go pray to.
Okay.
So I don't know if you've ever seen the video. They go and they walk around the big black covered shrine.
Yeah.
But that's what these things are.
Okay.
Those, nobody knows what's in them. Well, obviously the priests who go inside do, but that it's like same thing with the Ark of the Covenant. It's such the holy of holies.
Okay.
We're not allowed to know.
Very well kept secret.
Very well kept secret, and I want to know.
Of course you do.
Let's talk about the Prophet Muhammad, though.
Muhammad?
Yeah, that's kind of like a little bit of a swear word. You can't really talk about Muhammad too much.
Is it really?
Yeah, you're not really supposed to draw the likeness of Muhammad and really talk about him too much. But for the purpose of education, I want to talk about Muhammad's belongings.
Okay.
So he was a real guy. We can really prove that Muhammad was a real dude.
Of course. Same with Jesus.
Right. These were real men, real prophets, real people.
Sure.
Muhammad, allegedly, his barber kept his beard and shaved his beard off. So there is a museum in Turkey that houses these relics that are specific to Islam.
Okay.
And Muhammad's beard is among these relics.
I can see how that would be very sacred to them.
And Muhammad's footprint is among these relics.
Cute.
Like one single footprint.
That's cute. I like that.
Well, it's interesting because this is actually counter to what Muhammad taught. Muhammad teaches to worship God above all other things. So it is speculated that he would actually be upset his belongings were being worshipped.
Well, that's a problem that a lot of prophets come across, is that they are heralded as gods and as divine people when they are trying to, in fact, take the focus off of themselves to a higher purpose.
Right.
Fascinating.
Yeah, but those are all in a museum in Turkey that are on display for viewing. Obviously, we can't really go see that right now.
Right. I think that overall, it's the same as it is with sacred places or sacred people. It's the intention that you put into an object and the energy that you put toward it, the legend that you create for it. That's what makes an item sacred.
Absolutely.
It's the story that follows it.
And one more that I think is worth noting that belongs to Japan. These are the 5 legendary swords, and they actually rotate on display.
Through the castles?
Yeah, they do rotate on display. But their names are really long. They have a lot of history behind them.
I love Japan.
You're just going to have to go Google, honestly, if you want.
Just go to Japan.
Just go to Japan. But one of the swords recently was on display before coronavirus. And they don't go on display very often. But every now and then they do rotate the display of these 5 legendary weapons that are believed to have killed demons and conquered nations.
Right.
And this is the same...
swords used by legendary figures.
Right. So this is the same... this is basically like the Holy Grail. It's like any other religious sacred relic. You know, these 5 swords are not only what is the craftsmanship mind-blowing, which makes them legendary, the stories and legends behind them make them legendary. And what's so wild is that there is blood on these swords.
Yeah.
Because blood was like infused in them. That blows my mind that we have literal DNA. Like, so let's say the one that was recently on display was the one that allegedly slayed a demon and took the head of a demon. The sword has blood on it. That could be demon blood.
It could be demon blood. It could be, a person that could be likened to a demon.
See, this is what I think is more likely, is when you create myths and legends, is that the demon was some sort of really powerful other person.
Sure.
That kind of seemed larger than life evil.
Sure.
And when
we have those people in history that we can draw those connections to, and I'm sure if you come across them in person or in battle, they would seem like a demon.
Right. Well, yeah, we should talk about that. We should talk about the creation of divine figures on an episode, and kind of one of the theories of the thought processes of man, and how we turn people into demons and gods, and these divine, holy.
Maybe in our tulpa episode.
I don't know if that would quantify as a tulpa, but we also will talk about tulpas.
I can't wait to talk about tulpas. But anyway, I mean, yeah, that's sacred objects. That's everything that you need to know about them. If you have something that rests on your altar and you use ritually, then that's your sacred object.
Mm-hmm. It's really fascinating, and
it can be something very simple, or it can be the mythological mysteries that haunt us today.
Well, right, but all of those objects, they just started as regular objects.
Yeah, it's just a cup.
It was just a cup. It was just a linen.
Right. Yeah. I guess it's what you do with it and who you become determines the fate of the object.
Isn't that wild?
It's fascinating.
That's just so crazy to me to think about.
I love it. I love it. Well, this has been Midnight Curiosities. Thank you guys for joining us. Midnight Curiosities is hosted by One Eye Oddities, our parent company, a new way to see magic. This week I wanted to shout out Valkling.
Oh, yes.
Left a beautiful review.
Yes, thank you.
And I want to apologize to Valkling because they left it at the same time as Waylon98 did, and I just overlooked it, which I apologize for. So, yeah, thank you, Valkling, for your review. If you like what we do here, please tell your friends. Please review us on Apple or wherever you listen to your podcast because it really helps us grow. And I'm sure you guys can notice, but we're learning a lot every day, and we're trying to get better and better to make a product worth listening to.
Yeah, thanks for staying with us if you're sticking with us.
Yeah, we really appreciate it through this trial period, and we're gonna get there very, very soon.
And shout out to all of our European followers and listeners.
Yeah, so we will see you guys next week, and I am Curator Raquel.
And I'm Curator War Beauty.
And as always, don't forget
to become an oddity.